Good day, everyone. So today we will be discussing about one of the major biochemical processes that is happening inside the human body. Okay, so we will be digging deeper and to extract more ideas about it because it is a very complex discussion. It's a very complex topic, and we have to dissect it in order for you to understand it well. Okay, so let's start our discussion by simply applying or giving descriptions of it or applying it at home. Okay, so what are some of the applications of today's topic at home? Okay, so at home we often do specific tasks or we perform a task. Like for example, by simply cooking or washing the dishes, washing our clothes, fixing our things, or simply by running and walking. Okay, so what do you think is the reason behind why we could able to do this task? Okay? So what fuels our body to perform this specific task? Because of what? Because of energy. And how do we get energy? So we get energy from the food that we eat. Because from the food that we eat, there are already stored energy there. So what we're going to do is to absorb, to eat those foods and to absorb those energy. So we will discuss how do these foods being broken down into smaller pieces and then how does it being transferred in our body. Okay? So, from the food that we eat, we get energy from it. Okay? In like manner, okay? In like manner with our mga with our cars or mga sasakyan natin, paano nga ba napapatakbo or what fuels or what makes our car move because of fuel. Okay? So, kailangan niya ng fuel in order for it to move. Okay? Like for example, yung mga radios natin o yung mga gadgets natin. So, ang radio, nilalagyan natin ng battery in order for it to function. Right? So, kailangan niya ng energy because in the battery, there is what we call stored energy there. So, nabibigyan niya ng buhay yung radio. In like manner in our body or in human body. So, kailangan nating kumain in order for us to be energized. Kasi if you're skipping a meal, napapansin natin na we feel so weak, we feel so pale, we feel so tired, ano pa, we feel so parang low bat. Okay? So, there's a specific topic in biology that deals on how we get energy from the food that we eat. And we will talk more about it. Okay? So, our discussion is all about cellular respiration. Okay? So, kapag narinig kasi natin ang respiration, our notion would be it's more on the breathing process, the way of inhalation and exhalation or the gas exchange. But from this topic, we will talk more about on how we get energy from the food that we eat. So let's start our discussion from this. Okay? So here, all heterotrophic organisms, including man, depend directly or indirectly on plants and other photosynthetic organisms for food. Kapag sinabi nating heterotrophic class, it means to say these are organisms that depend on others for food. So they don't have the capability to manufacture their own food. Okay? Example, animals, humans. Not only humans and animals, but also other microorganisms like fungi, protists. Okay. So we have also particularly protists, yung mga animal like protists natin, they are heterotrophic in nature. So kapag sinabi naman natin photosynthetic organisms, it includes itong mga plants natin. Okay? Ang mga plants, they are also considered as autotrophic organisms. From the word autotrophic, auto, which means self, trophic, which means feeders. So they are self-feeders, meaning to say they have the capability to manufacture their own food. Okay? So that's what we mean with, or when we talk about autotroph or autotrophic organisms. Okay? So aside from plants, there is also a specific example. It is an aquatic organism. It is a bacterium that is also that has also the capability to make their own food. They are photosynthetic bacterium. Okay? So they are commonly called as cyanobacterium. So this is the only bacterium, okay, that has the capability to make its own food. Okay? So the food must be digested to simple forms such as glucose, amino acids, and triglycerides. These are then transported to the cells. So nag-undergo pa ng tinatawag nating metabolic reaction. Okay? So from bigger substances to smaller substances. So there is what we call metabolism. Okay? So we have two types of metabolisms. Okay? We have the catabolism and anabolism. Okay? So from bigger substances like carbohydrates, proteins, lipids. So these are bigger or big substances. And mag-undergo ito ng catabolism, okay, in order for it to become a smaller molecule. Okay? Ang carbohydrates, nag-undergo siya ng catabolism. Okay? From the word cat. Nakakat ang carbohydrates in order to form glucose. Ang proteins naman nag-undergo ng catabolism in order to form amino acids. Ang lipids or lipids nag-undergo ng catabolism in order to form triglyceride or glycerol or fatty acids. Okay? So these smaller substances are being transported into our cells. Okay? So here, where do you get your glucose? Ano nga ba or what are the sources of glucose? Okay? So these are examples of glucose or carbs or carbohydrates. We have here the sucrose or the table sugar. Okay, ang sucrose class is an example of disaccharide. It is being composed of two monosaccharide or two sugars. Okay? Okay? So nanggaling ang sucrose sa pinagsamang glucose plus fructose. Okay? Meron din tayong ditong glucose and fructose. So, fructose is the sweetest sugar. So, matatagpuan natin ang fructose sa mga fruits. For example, apple, mango, strawberries, and many more. Okay, we have also here lactose. Saan natin matatagpuan ang lactose? So, we usually find it sa mga milk and dairy products. And we have also the maltose. So, maltose, okay, so we usually get it from malted drinks and beers. So these are sources of glucose, sugar, or shall we say, carbohydrates. Okay. So next, let's define first what is energy. Okay. So energy in general comes in many forms, including light, heat, and electricity. It is also stored in things like foods and in batteries. So cells use food energy to charge special cell batteries called ATP. So glucose inside the cell is broken down to release the stored energy. So when we talk about ATP, it is called as adenosine triphosphate. It is the energy currency of the cell. So these are some of the trivias about energy. So cell energy is also termed as ATP or adenosine triphosphate. It contains adenine, modified piece of DNA, a ribose sugar, and a three phosphates. Cells use ATP for active transport, for homeostasis, and any movement. That battery, ATP, is adenosine diphosphate. So that's ADP. So if it is being recharged, nagiging ATP siya. So ADP forms when a P is broken off ATP to release energy. ADP can be recharged by using food energy to reconnect the P. So here is the what do you call this one, definition of cellular respiration. It is a chemical process that releases energy from organic compounds, gradually converting it into energy that is stored in ATP molecules. So it's a biochemical processes that is happening inside our body, particularly in the fundamental unit of life, which is the cell. Before we discuss more about cellular respiration, let's first discuss what is mitochondrion. Alam naman nating lahat na ang mitochondrion serves as the powerhouse of the cell. Bakit siya tinawag na powerhouse of the cell? Because it is the site for the production of energy, production of power. It is the site for cellular respiration. So ang mitochondrion has two separate membranes. Ito yung inner membrane and the outer membrane. So mitochondrion has three compartments. Meron siyang intermembrane space, cristae space, and the matrix. Okay? So makikita natin dito that the mitochondrion has its own DNA. Okay? So aside from nucleus and chloroplast, ang mitochondrion, meron din siyang sariling deoxyribonucleic acid or the DNA. So all cells, including plants, use respiration to recharge their ATP. So respiration or cellular respiration reverses the work of photosynthesis. Why? Paano nga ba nangyari? Ano ba ang connection ng photosynthesis sa cellular respiration? Ganito yan. So the products or the byproducts of photosynthesis are glucose and oxygen. So ang glucose and oxygen, ginagamit yan as reactant during the process of cellular respiration. So the byproduct of cellular respiration are water and carbon dioxide, which are then used as reactant during the process of photosynthesis. So respiration reverses the work of photosynthesis. So there is what we call interdependent to each other. So plants and animals are interdependent to each other because plants or animals release carbon dioxide and water that plants need during the process of photosynthesis. And plants release sugar and oxygen that animals use in the process of cellular respiration. So it uses oxygen to break down a sugar, releasing carbon dioxide and water as waste. So how does respiration and photosynthesis differs in terms of raw materials? So we will discuss that further as we go on with our discussion. So there are also two types of respiration, which are aerobic and anaerobic respiration. So kapag sinabi nating aerobic respiration, it requires oxygen. And anaerobic respiration doesn't require oxygen. So let's proceed with the things or the stages of cellular respiration. So the first stage would be glycolysis, followed by the Krebs cycle, and the third one would be the electron transport chain or yung tinatawag nating oxidative phosphorylation. Let's start with the stage 1 o yung tinatawag nating glycolysis. For the word itself, glycolysis, glucose and lysis, which means splitting. So, kapag sinabi nating glycolysis, splitting of glucose. Okay? So, kailangan ng glucose in the first stage, which is glycolysis. Okay, so here it is the glucose is partially broken down by cells in enzyme reaction that do not need oxygen. So glycolysis is one method that cells use to produce energy, and it happens in the cytoplasm. Okay? Hindi pa siya nangyayari sa loob ng mitochondrion. Nandun pa lang siya doon sa liquid or jelly-like fluid. Doon sa may cytoplasm ng cell. So here, makikita natin sa ating diagram that there are 6 molecules of carbon sugar as raw materials that is needed in the process of glycolysis. So meron tayong 6 carbon sugar. So yung 6 carbon sugar na yun, which is glucose, is broken down into 2 molecules. So makikita natin dun sa diagram na dalawang molecule tig-tatatlo. Okay? So meron tayong tig-tatatlong carbon sugar. So 2 molecules. So the change was accompanied by a net gain of how many ATP? So meron tayong 2 ATP molecules at makikita din natin na meron tayong na-produce na 2 NADH o yung tinatawag nating nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide hydrogen molecule. Okay? So that's 2 NADH. Ang NADH class, these are electron acceptor. Okay? These are cofactors. Na itong mga electron na nakukuha niya during each process is dadalhin niya sa electron transport chain. So whatever electrons na magigain dito sa process ng glycolysis, madadala niya doon sa last stage, which is the ETC or the electron transport chain. So this is the process. So meron tayong 6 molecules ng carbon sugar. So mag-split yan, okay? Mag-split yan into 2. So there are 3 carbon molecules that are being made. So each 3 carbon molecule gives high energy electron and hydrogen to make an NADH. So maraming electron dito na ma-produce. These are high electron or high energy electron. So each 3 molecules then gives energy to make 4 ATP molecules. So 2 each side. So makikita ninyo dyan. So each 3 molecules now becomes a molecule of pyruvate. So the NADH carries energy to the mitochondrion to be used in the electron transport chain, as I have mentioned earlier. So ang na-produce dito sa first stage would be pyruvate. Okay? Itong pyruvate na to, gagamitin ito in the process or in the next stage, which is the Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle. Okay? So dito pa rin tayo sa glycolysis. If there is no oxygen that is being involved, that is anaerobic respiration. Pero kapag merong oxygen involved, that is aerobic respiration. So after glycolysis, meron tayong na-produce na 2 ATP. Okay? So alcohol fermentation. Okay? Kapag sinabi natin fermentation, there is no oxygen present here. Okay? This is anaerobic respiration. For example, we have yeast and bacteria. Kapag lactic acid fermentation naman, these are muscle cells, yeast, and bacteria. So kapag umaakyat tayo, like for example, in a 3-story building, nandun tayo sa 3rd floor, umakyat tayo. So nafe-feel natin na parang hinihingal tayo, napapagod tayo. Because nawawalan tayo ng oxygen. So, nahihirapan yung katawan nating mag-undergo ng cellular respiration. So, instead of cellular respiration, nagkakaroon ng lactic acid fermentation. So, lactic acid ang naproproduce natin kapag there is insufficient amount of oxygen. Okay? So, let's proceed with the stage 2 or the Krebs cycle, yung tinatawag nating citric acid cycle. So, dito sa Krebs cycle, it occurs in the mitochondrion na. Nasa loob siya ng mitochondrion, particularly in the matrix. And it generates a pool of chemical energy. Okay? So from the oxidation of pyruvate, so it's the end product of glycolysis. Okay? So itong pyruvate na to, there are still extractable energy here. So kailangan pang ma-extract to in order to produce a particular enzyme. Okay, ano nga ba ang ibig sabihin ng pyruvate oxidation? Kasi kapag sinabi nating oxidation, there is what we call loss of electron. Okay? So at the end of glycolysis, we have two pyruvate molecules that still contains a lot of extractable energy. So kailangan nating extract pa yung pyruvate na na-produce at the end of glycolysis. So what type of molecules are released during the process of pyruvate oxidation? Okay, so there are two carbons that are released as carbon dioxide out of the 6 originally present in glucose. Okay, and there are two NADH molecules that are generated from NAD+. So acetyl coenzyme A acts as fuel for the citric acid cycle in the next stage of cellular respiration. So it's just a preparatory stage before going to the Krebs cycle. So nire-ready niya muna. Kasi meron pa mga extractable energy. Hindi pwedeng yung pyruvate mag-undergo kaagad sa citric acid cycle or sa Krebs cycle. Kailangan mo munang ma-extract para makuha yung mga excess electron. Okay? O yung in the form of NADH or FADH. So here, pyruvate is transported into the mitochondria and loses what? Carbon dioxide from acetyl coenzyme A. So here, there is what we call a release of carbon dioxide. When acetyl coenzyme A is oxidized to carbon dioxide in this cycle, chemical energy is released and captured in the form of NADH, FADH2, and 2-ATP. So at the end of the Krebs cycle process, there are 2-ATP that are being produced. At itong NADH and FADH2 na to, these are parang nag-a-accept ng mga electrons at ito dadalhin niya doon sa last stage, which is the electron transport chain. So the last stage would be the electron transport chain. Okay? So these are the simplified steps. Okay? So it consists of series of electron transporters, mostly proteins embedded in the inner mitochondrial membrane. So this phase of cellular respiration produces the greatest number of chemical energy in the form of ATP. So mas maraming nagagawang ATP dito sa last process kasi nandun na lahat ng electron na ginagamit in order to form ATP. So these are the simplified steps. It happens in the cristae. So cristae naman ng mitochondrion nangyayari ang ETC. These are the reactants, oxygen, NADH. The products are water and 34 ATP. So at the end of ETC, we have the byproduct na water and 34 ATP. So if we're going to compute all the ATPs that are being produced from glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and etc., there are 38 ATP. So, delivery of electrons by NADH and FADH. So, yung mga na-accumulate from glycolysis to Krebs cycle na NADH and FADH, because sila yung nagdadala ng electron, dinadala nila lahat dito sa electron transport chain. So, electron transport and proton pumping, ito yung tinatawag nating chemiosmosis. So, there's a splitting of oxygen to form water. Okay? So, kapag sa photosynthesis naman, class, there is what we call oxidation naman ng water to form oxygen. Okay? So, yung water, naglo-lose siya ng electron to form oxygen. It is particularly in the photo part of photosynthesis. Kasi ang photosynthesis, meron siyang photo part and the synthesis part. Doon sa photo part, that's the light-dependent reaction that is happening in the thylakoid region. Okay? So, it is a gradient-driven synthesis of ATP. So, if we're going to sum it up, these are the bases of comparison. Okay? So, sa glycolysis, ang raw material will be glucose. The byproducts are 2-pyruvic acid and 2-NADH. So, the number of ATP yielded would be 2 ATP. Sa Krebs cycle naman, the raw materials would be 2-pyruvic acid. So, the byproducts are 8 NADH, 2 FADH2, and carbon dioxide, and the number of ATP yielded would be 2. And sa ETC naman, the raw materials are 10 NADH, 2 FADH, and oxygen gas. The byproduct would be water, and the number of ATP that is being yielded would be 34. Okay, so this is the basis, or these are the bases of comparison from glycolysis to electron transport chain. So how we're going to compare yung photosynthesis and cellular respiration, because they are interdependent to each other. So sa cell structures involved, sa photosynthesis, chloroplast. Okay? Ang chloroplast is the site for photosynthesis. Sa cellular respiration naman, it's the mitochondrion. Mitochondrion is the site for cellular respiration. What are the inputs? In photosynthesis, ang mga reactants are carbon dioxide, water, and light energy coming from the sun. While in respiration, the inputs are glucose and oxygen. So these are the reactants. The products naman, the products of photosynthesis would be glucose and oxygen. While in cellular respiration, we have water, ATP, and carbon dioxide. How about the reactions involved? Ano yung mga reactions na involved? In photosynthesis, there are two reactions. Okay? We have the light-dependent reaction and the light-independent reaction, or in other words, we have Calvin cycle or dark reaction. Okay? So sa cellular respiration naman, we have three reactions. We have glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and electron transport chain. So that's all about cellular respiration. I hope you understood our discussion for today. Goodbye, everyone. How about the foods that are rich in amino acid? So amino acid is also considered as the building blocks of life. Why? Because everything that you see in your physical appearance are all made up of amino acid or proteins. Okay? From your skin, your hair, your nails, and from your genetic makeup or your chromosomes or your DNA, it is all made up of protein. Because our skin and our skin is all made up of what we call structural protein called collagen. Our hairs and nails are also made up of structural protein that is called keratin. Kaya tinawag na amino acid is the building blocks of life. So these are some of the sources of amino acid. For example, eggs, meat, poultry, and many more. So we have examples of amino acids which are the essential amino acid and non-essential amino acid. Ang essential amino acids are, or amino acid is a type of amino acid that is needed by our body but our body cannot able to synthesize it. Hindi siya nagagawa sa loob ng ating katawan. So you usually get it from the foods that we eat. For example, yung mga protein-rich foods. Ang non-essential amino acid naman is a type of amino acid that the body can able to synthesize. So nagagawa siya sa loob ng ating katawan pero yung katawan natin hindi kailangan ito. Okay? So our next would be triglyceride. So what is triglyceride or fatty acids or glycerol or fatty acids? So what are foods that are rich in triglyceride? Okay? Ang triglyceride natin, class, is usually found sa ating mga adipose tissues. Particularly dun sa mga part na matutumbok o malalaki. Particularly yung ating butt at breast. So there are more triglyceride that are present there. Okay? So, ang triglyceride or yung lipids na tinatawag natin is a long-term storage of energy unlike ang carbohydrate which is a short-term storage of energy. Wherein, kapag na-consume na natin yung carbs natin sa ating katawan, the next na pwede nating ma-consume would be the triglyceride. Kaya siya tinawag na long-term storage of energy. So these are the foods that are rich in triglyceride. We have alcohol, saturated and trans fat, sugar, refined grains or starchy foods, and high-calorie foods. Example ng ating triglyceride would be the saturated fatty acid and the unsaturated fatty acid. Ang saturated fatty acid is liquid at room temperature, meaning to say it is oil-based. Okay? So it is usually found sa ating mga plants. Yung mga tinatawag natin mga oil, yung olive oil natin is saturated fatty acid. In other hand, ang unsaturated fatty acid naman natin is solid at room temperature. These are yung fats na nakukuha natin sa mga kinakain natin mga matataba at masyadong mamantika. Okay?